Yes, you can start the session.
Yeah, wait a while. Yeah.
You look so serious now, DK.
No, I'm actually trying to put it on to the groups and then I can work on. I am not able to get that into one.
What does DK mean?
This is a Bollywood actor called Dalip Kumar.
Mm.
And my father was very fond of this, you know, Bollywood. So he named all the brothers that Bollywood stars.
Ha! Look at you.
Yeah.
So you were predestined to become one,
I could not become the Bollywood one, but I
huh?
became the star of whatever I do. So just a moment, then I start in a few minutes. It's not going. It's okay. I think I can't go beyond that. Let me start.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have 3 minutes. Yeah, great good morning in United States, Canada. Good afternoon in England, in Europe, and parts of Africa. Good evening in Asia Pacific, India, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, and all neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed a great day for me to welcome someone whom I regard and respect, and I honor him and I talk to him and I address him, Doctor of Leadership.
Ooh. I better live up to your standards.
And his name is well known, Dr. Alfredo Behrens.
Hey, I'm here. I'm here. Thank you very much.
So let me quickly take you through, ladies and gentlemen, about this great guy of leadership. He is a professor of leadership at IME, Universidad de Salamanca. I don't know whether I pronounce it.
Yeah, sure, that's fair enough. Salamanca, 800 years old.
Yeah, 300 years old. This prime
800. It's old. It's old. Yeah, it's old.
This prime time leadership excellence series called New DNA of Leadership. I, from the core of my heart and on behalf of Global Talent Company, welcome Dr. Alfredo, the Doctor of Leadership. And it is my indeed honor.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
Let me introduce such a great education and business excellence leader to you, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Alfredo is presently in Europe, in a country called Portugal,
Yes.
and he lives in a place called Porto. You can see his background, beautiful background.
Yes, look.
Wow, that's beautiful. And he has been the advisory council of Golden Studies think tank, PhD from University of Cambridge, Dr. Alfredo is an author, teacher, and unabashed communicator. He seeks to make the workplace somewhere people want to come back
Yes.
with a smile on their faces.
Yes.
Dr. Alfredo writes and speaks about ways to enhance the fit of leadership, and management to national and international cultures. He does this because he feels that a better fit will ensure greater happiness and
Yes.
literacy at work and in life in general. He is an investigator on what makes people of different cultures tick and suggest ways in which they prefer to get organized to work. Dr. Alfredo has been interviewed on cross-cultural management, expert by Financial Times, The Economist, the People Matters in New Delhi, and all
Yes.
the way from Buenos Aires clan to Mexico Universal. He also speaks at corporate meetings in English, Spanish, and Portuguese
Yes.
languages. Dr. Alfredo received PhD at the University of Cambridge. He has taught at Princeton University and lectured at many leading business schools in 5 continents. Many publications, many articles at Thunderbird and at Harvard Business Review and elsewhere, besides few books by him at Stanford Press, as well as others. Dr. Alfredo, most recent book, Gaucho Dialogues, was at the tops as best Latino management book
Yes.
and was nominated to be turned into a TV series. Wow.
Yes. Still to happen. I'm looking for a sponsor.
In fact, he has former life as an economist, which supports his macro approach to issues. He has lectured courses on cross-cultural field, people management and leadership, internationalization of corporations, organization culture, change management, negotiations, corporate social responsibility, micro and microeconomics. He wrote 3 books on the matter and consulted for large chemical corporations like Bayer, manufacturing ones like Volkswagen, media ones like Time Warner, and Diverty Eventos, energy companies like Duke Energy, mining like Anglo American and Nexus Resources, for high-tech ones like Honeywell, and for pharmaceutical ones like GSK, Sanofi, among others. Dr. Alfredo also consults for mid-sized international corporations like Benson's, Isden, and Climto. His lectures would be everywhere from in Harvard Business Review USA, Financial Times, ABC, Spain, Claire in Argentina, America Economic, Chill, and El Universal, Mexico. The profile is so profound. I can keep on and on, but then we need to be with the time. Dr. Alfredo, sir, I am really honored that you
I
are.
am, and I thank you very much for this invitation, DK. You do a fantastic job in connecting people and giving them voice.
Thank you so much. Dr. Alfredo, we are on Zoom right now, and we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Global Talent Television. So there are people coming on different platforms. I would give you a framework. I would be talking to you for next 35 to 40 minutes, you and me. I will have some questions for you. And in the meanwhile, the attendees who will be from different parts of the world will keep on putting their questions in the Q&A section. After we are through, I would take the questions from them, and those who are on Zoom I will unmute them and they can ask questions directly. While as those who are on other platforms, I will pick up the questions and ask you.
Good.
Dr.
Thank
Alfredo,
you.
can I start?
Yes, shoot, as the Americans say.
Dr. Alfredo, you know, I certainly call you the doctor of leadership.
Well, that's
First of
kind of
all,
you.
let me go to your childhood.
Yes.
You were
Oh,
born in
yes.
Uruguay, turned into
Yes.
Brazilian, a
Yes.
child of a broken family with
Yes.
blue collar overtunes,
Yes.
but inserted into an upper class education. Can you
Yes.
please share with us the story of your childhood as well as yourself as a student?
Oh,
All
well,
your
it's a long life, but I'll just be shorter about it, DK. In the last segment of this series of you, this beautiful series of you, Asha Bandarkar brought up the issue of family and how family shapes your future by inserting you in education, say. And it's true. I agree with it. It just depends on which family you're born into. And some people are luckier than others. I was lucky in a way that, I was brought up into a family that cared for me, and I was happy, relatively happy during some time. But then my parents broke off, and in an acrimonious way, and I was caught in the middle of that fight since rather early on. On my father's side, he was not wealthy, but he prized education, and he stuck me into an English school in Montevideo, Uruguay. He was an Anglophile, and he had gone to the same school, him and his brother. And it was a good school, I must admit. My mother, on the other hand, came from middle class, or perhaps even lower middle class family, where my uncle was worked in the port of Montevideo, the harbor, and so I was influenced by these two different areas of the world. Then upper class school in Uruguay, where I was expected to speak in English, when I couldn't really master, and at home I had a completely different lifestyle and even values and a cohort. But family, yes, shapes you. For example, when I was very small, perhaps 10 years old, I was visiting my paternal grandmother, and somewhere prominent in her living room, she had a diploma earned by my uncle as a PhD at the University of Cambridge. And she spoke about that with some reverence. I didn't even have a clue of what Cambridge meant. I was 10 years old and I was completely away from it all. But I realized that she prized that and that she cherished it. And I said, hey, one day I'll get one of those. And it's strange because that gives you some sort of direction in your life. But as you pointed out, yes, a broken family tends to make you an angry child. And angry childs initially are difficult to handle. Usually they try to tame down, right? Behave, and they are instilled into obedience and discipline, which just makes matters worse, really. And, a first leadership experience in my life, I was a gang leader.
Is it?
Terrible thing, yes. I mean, nothing serious, but nothing that would have put me behind the bars, But I wasn't a force for construction in life. No, I was rather destructive, and even at school. And I got suspended once at school, and at a difficult time of the year because I missed all my final examinations. But I was right, at least for the incident that I was suspended. And I could tell in my headmaster's look that he knew that I was right at that time, but he had to suspend me. I was lucky to latch up with him about 20 or 30 years later because, he was very young at the time and he's still around and he's still a very kind man. And we talked about this incident. Mm-hmm. And he's still a gentleman, so he wouldn't admit that the teacher was wrong. But we both agreed that something had changed between that experience of being suspended and the next year, when I became rugby captain, head boy of the school, and God knows what else. And part of that was probably the result of the fact that the father of one of my girlfriends at school, not my girlfriend, but a lady that was a friend,
Okay.
and probably spoke about how terrible I was at home. And her father thought that I could be a coach of his son. So he called me up and I said, Alfredo, I would like you to coach my son, which I did. But I was surprised that anybody of the stature of this man that became a minister, an ambassador, or whatever, would be calling me to help his son. I mean, I had never been called to do anything positive in my life. So probably that trust that somebody put into my lap allowed or triggered that change that led me into become a force of nature of a better disposition, say, to speak. And, you know, that changed my life. I continued being some sort of a young leader in my country, besides being a rugby captain and a head boy at school. When I entered the national system of education, I became a class representative. The class was small, 60, 90 people. But the next year I entered the university and we were 1,500 in that cohort. And again, I was elected to be a leader of that group. And I was surprised that, you know, people 5 or 6 years older than me would come up to me for advice. And you say, and you have to give advice, right? And where do you draw that advice from? From your values, because you have no experience. Yeah, but then the government, you know, it was a difficult time throughout Latin America, and a coup d'etat arrived in Uruguay, and I joined a family that was migrating to Brazil, and then I entered this other environment, another language, another history, other literature. I couldn't understand a thing of what was going on. But you know, that's my story from a broken family until I was about 21 years old. So
Beautiful.
if you
And
have,
I would respect your grandma who could visualize the
yeah,
bridge. And you
yes.
rightly said that she gave me the direction, which was not known to you. It was unknown, unheard. But the Cambridge word hitting your mind,
Yes,
thoughts become things. You know, thoughts become
yeah,
things.
you're right. You're right. Very early on, I didn't even have a clue what
You
Cambridge
did not
meant.
have a clue.
No.
And it just came. So there was a thought which turned into a thing by some action. And I like another aspect of yours when you said that you were a rebellion, you know, and then you took the role of a leader, and people were coming to you, and the number of people who were under you in terms of leadership kept on increasing. And finally, when you were at 1,500 people, people were asking for suggestions. People were asking for advice.
Hmm.
Wow. That means your leadership has been part of your DNA from the childhood itself.
Hmm. Could
Ah,
be. I think that there is an element, an inner drive that leads you forward, and some guidance helps. But I'm still figuring out, you know, the difficulty of continuing to have a leadership style once you change the environment. I moved to Brazil, that stopped. Uh,
okay. Question.
well, you know, but coming back to Asha's comment, yes, family is very important, but there is an element of luck in where you're born, the country that you're born in, the family that you're born in, the school. So when people talk to me about meritocracy, I don't think much of that because it just depends where you start from. And that is very seldomly taken into account. And there are lots of people that probably deserve a better career than I've had in my life, but they didn't have the chance because they started from somewhere else, not as advantaged. So, you know, meritocracy is okay when you have the same standing, the same departure point, but most of the people don't. Hmm? And that is something that we have to take into account.
Absolutely. Absolutely
Yeah.
right in making this statement. Dr. Alfredo, when I see your career ladder, you're truly multinational,
Hmm.
multicultural,
Hmm.
multi-skilled, and multi-leadership skills also.
Hmm.
We When did you start your journey of touching new heights, new horizons?
Hmm.
And what made you to be different than others? Your persona,
Uh,
personality.
it's interesting, yes. Well, I think there again, family was important. My father was an Anglophile, as I told you. He put me into an English school, which turned out to be an international school. So there I came across people from other regions of the world. Not very many, but quite a few. People that landed in Uruguay being transferred from somewhere else, some Americans, some Dutch, some French, some Italians. Very few Latin Americans, but some. So that opens your mind, yes. And my mother was a dreamer,
Oh,
very beautiful. And she could have been an actress, a Hollywood actress, as you were mentioning there. Yes, but she never had the chance. But she would read all these international magazines and was a pen pal of people that lived abroad. My father studied in England. My uncle became that PhD from Cambridge. So, in a way, this international exposure was instilled into me from very early.
no.
Now, I don't claim to be a multicultural person. No, my living experience is circumscribed really to the Atlantic Ocean, to the shores around it, right? It's Uruguay, it's Brazil, it's most of Latin America, uh, England, Spain, Portugal now, the US. But mostly my work experience is that. I've worked in other countries, quite a few in Africa, sometimes in India, as you know. I have some experience about China. But if you ask me, Alfredo, what are you? Well, I am a person around the Atlantic Ocean. And you mentioned the languages that I have had to speak. And yes, it's not easy to develop yourself professionally in more than language. I don't think today I write properly in any of them. And when I went back to Uruguay, I asked a friend of mine, hey, listen, how's my Spanish? And this guy is rather deep, he's a psychiatrist. Oh, Fred, I know your Spanish is good, but it has a small twang of an airport to it. So, but I think that what is important is to have in mind that the stories shape you, the stories of the different places you've been, because you meet people, yes, but if you read their literature, watch their films, there's even their soap operas, you get to understand what makes them tick.
Mm,
And that changes from one place to another. So I think that if you want to have an international dimension to your life, to a great extent, you have to come out of your own background and learn, appreciate, show empathy for the difficulty of the people, that everybody carries their own cross in their backgrounds, as we, the Catholics, say. And it's not easy. And you have to sort of pull down your ego and lead from behind when the chance arrives. I remember that once the World Bank asked me to help the people that were taking office in Mandela's government. And off I went to South Africa. I didn't know anybody. I'd never been there. I had to find who their future leaders would be. And I had to rely on local scholars to make that training possible. And I didn't want to meddle into their views on the way that they were doing. I was just a World Bank official making things possible in a difficult environment because, being a World Bank official there was quite suspicious at the time. But I think that, I did a relatively good job by leading from behind. Most of the people that I collaborated saw me as so unassertive and unassuming that they probably thought I was a bit dumb.
mm.
I didn't care as long as the job was being done, right? They were the ones who were in the front line. I was just stepping in when things were going the wrong way, right? I remember that once one of them wanted to break the back of the Afrikaner, and I said, "Listen, you do that, and you will forego any international investment, and you need it because there's not enough money around." And so, by small interventions like that, I managed to instill some degree of trust and confidence into the people. But largely, it was their job, and they were going to live in South Africa. They had to lead their own country. I was just there to make things possible. So, leading from behind, even under adverse circumstances, is crucial. Uh, but it takes, It takes understanding what your role is. You're just there for the time being. We are in life for the time being, right? Not much more than that, and it doesn't last that long either.
I like your statement, but
Unfortunately.
yeah, COVID has taught all of us. We are here
Oh,
only
yeah,
for
telling
3
me, yes, yes, it's frightening, really.
Yeah, we don't know when we have to go.
Yeah.
And when you are here for time being, and I love one statement of yours when we are talking about working with multicultural, multinational, and you're
Hmm.
talking about empathy, and you're
Yes.
talking about taking the back seat, pull down your ego, pull down
Hmm.
your egos. I
Yeah,
love
yeah, yeah.
pulling down your ego, and then working with people, understanding them, and taking it forward.
Hmm.
Fascinating. I think what you have given us this evening to me and the attendees who are on the various platforms is when you are working in a multinational, multicultural, multidimensional areas, no egos, bow yourself down, understand, then respond with
Hmm.
empathy. You
Hmm.
actually gave one very powerful word called empathy. Wow. Dr. Alfredo, that's what the leadership is. And our next question, when you move to the next level of excellence, Brazilian, Cambridge, Princeton, what did you get out of it and how did it firm up, made you what you are today? And
Listen,
let me come, you are a big name
yes,
in the
yes.
world of education, excellence,
Yeah.
and leadership excellence. So, what was that which went into your DNA?
While I was at it, say at Cambridge, I didn't have much of an idea of my future. Mm. I had made it to Cambridge. I was accepted.
Hmm.
Then I had to leave, with grace.
No, you see.
That was my challenge. And in at top universities, you're surrounded by very bright people, and like the normal environment when you come, you everybody there is as good or even brighter than you are. So it's quite humbling, really. The question is that you can't break down. If you do, you're out. So I had some friends of mine that unfortunately did not speak English as well as I do, and they had a much harder time than I did. Because England is an island, and it's very self-referenced. As I heard Asha saying the other day, oh, you speak such good English. Somebody said that about her, and she felt a traitor. And in a way, I did too. When I arrived in London, this old lady in a double-decker bus, I said, "Oh, Uruguay, yes, but you speak such good English. Uruguay is not famous for its education, is it?"
I like
So, being able to communicate helps a lot. Otherwise, people think you're dumb. You're making your best and you can't. So, I think that the first thing is you have to have self confidence. And not the type of ego that will make you abrasive, but know your own self worth. I mean, your own self. Listen, I deserve it. I can have it in me. I can go for it. Yes, I'll succeed. That is something that you bring inside, huh? Perhaps from rugby, God knows from where, but you have to face the facts there. Now, organizations are all hierarchical. Cambridge was particularly interesting because the professors there were not only good, but they were not after money; they were after knowledge.
no, you see, yeah.
And that was something which I loved. Huh? It's the idea of, the only limits that I have to overcome are my own. That I didn't find at Princeton. There is so much go-getting there and fighting for funds, soft income in order to do your research and publish more than perhaps you should, because the ideas are not that frequent. I remember I came into an English professor at Princeton who said, actually, I feel a traitor because I had this research group in mathematicians at Cambridge, but I dropped them because I needed money to finance my second wife and my previous one and whatever. So he moved to Princeton for the money. Lovely person. I met quite a few British people there, played squash with them. Some became Nobel laureates like Angus Deaton. And this other one was considered one of the best mathematicians of the century. So Princeton also had all these bright guys there, but there was a mercenary attitude at Princeton, which I didn't like as much. Bright, yes, interesting, forceful, very rich university, perhaps as rich as Cambridge, God knows, or even more, I don't know. But the fact that money was important at Princeton, I didn't like as much. Now, it's not only these top universities that are very hierarchical. They are organizations like just about any others, and there's a lot of envy and there's a lot of vengeance and exclusion, and that is something that the people that won't work at universities think, no, these people are there, just doing their research. No, they fight a lot, too much, and it's not good. And regarding whether they fulfill their role, I think they do, but perhaps at extraordinarily expense. Universities could be doing much more for far less money, and particularly they should not hold people, young people, for as long in their things. I think that shorter careers would be a better way to help people there. Community colleges, American community college, do a great job in retraining people, finding new jobs once your own area has disappeared, like many have during the COVID. Don't go back to university, they'll hold you back forever. Some short training will do. And that doesn't cost as much, because what we have now in America is an enormous amount of people that, are severely indebted in order to pay universities that have become too expensive, unnecessarily so. So that has to change.
Absolutely. Good. Well, what a detailed overview you gave about it. And now get into another question. On your journey of excellence, how did you get into Standard University Press, lectured at Harvard Business Publishing, and also getting books awarded? I am sure my audience would love to hear this brilliant journey of excellence. Now, looking at your background, moving from that background, and finally reaching to the, Harvard Business.
Well, it's interesting. I don't have the recipe, and I've been lucky. Luck is important, right? But I think that, in order to make luck, you have to have something to show for yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that probably what made the difference was that I was true to myself. And so I was not doing the standard research that anybody does. So neither using the same methods, partly because I didn't have the money. I was researching in Brazil. And so what do? You work with what you have. So I came across the Coyote and the Roadrunner, for example. And I realized by reading the life of Chuck Jones, the creator, that he had designed that cartoon in order for people to align themselves with the coyote, which is what Americans and English people do. And yet most Latin Americans, certainly most Indians, they side with the Roadrunner. And that was an eye-opener, right? Because there's no translation error. And so I used that in order to test allegiances amongst people. And I realized that to some extent, people learn how to be in their societies, how to operate and how to work through the stories that they read. And this is what came out in that book that got published at Stanford University Press. I was looking at Americans through their literature, and their literature, their iconic literature, always has goals that have to be attained, and there's usually one best path to get to it. That is from childhood stories like The Engine That Could, to Moby Dick, to films like Apocalypse Now. you name it. The Coyote and the Roadrunner, of course. But this is what makes Americans what they are, and what makes American management so adapted to their own mindset. This is what you have to do in order to get there.
Wow.
And yet, most of the literature in our countries, in Latin America, Spain and Portugal, is oriented for you to enjoy the journey together. Destination, the goal is not as important.
Oh, I see.
So this is why we have a hard time fitting in to American management, because we're constantly pressured to attain a goal, even competing against our colleagues, when really what we want to do is enjoy life. Right? And be kind to each other. Now, fighting and competing against our colleagues is tantamount to treason amongst us. So if you want to treat our people in that way, exactly the same way as Americans, it doesn't work as well. It makes you unhappy, performance drops. So I think that that book that published at Stanford picked up on that. And this is what led to Harvard Business Review to publish an article of mine on Coyote and the Roadrunner. Then somebody said, oh, this guy has something to say, let's listen. And it worked for some time. But then the editors change, you know. A new one comes in. Yeah, a new one comes in and says, oh, enough of Alfredo, pick somebody else.
It's an amazing journey, and I love your word, which you say, I have been true to myself.
Oh, yes, it's essential, really.
It's essential. The learning here is that we need to be true to ourselves. Whom are we cheating? Ourselves.
Oh, yes.
Ourselves. So
Yeah.
in COVID era, a lot of people have probably understood this.
Yes.
But
Just let me tell you a little anecdote of how business schools are. You know, I was working in a business school in Brazil with a colleague, and in the library, I saw my Stanford book on a shelf. And I pointed out to him, hey, look, my book is there. He says, yeah, how did you manage? Do you know somebody there? And I told him, no, guy, you know, I could tell where that was coming from, sheer envy, right? So I told him, no. First, you have to write something interesting, and then you have to show it. But, you know, DK, not everybody will pick it up. It just depends on whether what you write about hits somebody that has an idea. Oh, yes, right? So, for example, this book on Gaucho dialogues that I wrote about leadership amongst Latin Americans, it made waves. It got an award in California, a land of immigrants.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, because they're more sensitive to this plight of being myself in a foreign country.
Yeah.
This book for the childhood story, The Cow That Learned to Fly in order to get to Washington seeking greener pastures, which came out of a story that I would tell my children when they were very young to explain why I had gone to Washington to work for the World Bank. But that book then got an award also in California, a land of immigrants. And it got published not in Brazil, but in Portugal, a land of emigrants. So, you see, yeah, so sometimes, you know, what happens is that being true to yourself, you have to show your piece and your work to your own tribe, so to speak, because there are several tribes around the world. Not everybody will be as accepting of what you have to say.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. You need to be looking at some of the tribes.
Yes.
Not every tribe will be fascinated by you. There are multiple tribes in the world. So at least go to some tribes and you make an impact.
Yes.
Well, it's amusing and amazed the statement you are saying. And I love this statement today. Dr. Alfredo, what are your thoughts on building a very strong, I'm now moving from your journey of excellence to general leadership. What are your thoughts on building a strong and best organization leadership? You know, there are two kinds of leaders around us. One is who go with the ranks, like the Catholic Church, and those who get assignments for the leadership role in various business organizations. What is your organizational leadership which you can share for us. What kind of
DK,
attitude, what kind of attribute should have to have a very meaningful and successful role as a leader?
DK, that's a difficult question. A deep one.
God,
Doesn't surprise me that it comes.
God.
It doesn't surprise me that it comes from you. Just to give you an idea, right, of my thought about this. The Catholic Church, for the first time in 2,000 years, has had 3 popes, not 1, not 2, but 3, successively that are non-Italians.
Well,
Yeah, first time in 2,000 years.
I see.
Right? Now, if you look at the board of governors of most multinationals, they don't come anywhere near. Right? They're all, these guys from the same school, the same city, the same country, certainly. And they claim to be multinational because they have spread their products all over the world. But really, they are quite provincial. Right? And those are the guys that decide who gets appointed to CEO, and those guys decide who gets appointed to the subsidiaries. And because they pay, they make you dance to their tune, and it doesn't really work very nicely. On the other hand, the Catholic Church has now an electoral college, so to speak, that reflects a far greater share of the world, of the people that believe they are Catholics. So it's quite likely that the appointment of the next Pope will be closer to the mindset of the vast majority of the clergy and the Catholics around the world than any multinational can claim to be. Right? So I think that there is something to be learned about this, in the sense that if a leader emerges from the ranks, it's more likely to be better attuned to the people that they need to be leading. On the other hand, if you're in a multinational, say, oh, things have to be done my way, and I'll appoint all these leaders all over the place. And quite frankly, I have not been very impressed by the CEOs that I've seen leading subsidiaries. I mean, I've had more interesting conversations with an illiterate fisherman on an island in Brazil than I've had with more than half of the CEOs of the subsidiaries that I have worked with. You see, this fisherman was asking himself the big questions. Where does all the water go when it's low tide in my beach? He didn't know anything about Galileo, no? But he was concerned with the depth of the sea level at the time that he needed to go out to fish. Sure. And he was asking the big questions. Now, if you speak to most of these CEOs of subsidiaries, even large companies, they are quite uninteresting. They are just following routines, because this is what large companies do. They're built around routines. This is where we have to go there, and this is the way that you have to go there. And they have all these incentives to make people work in a certain way. They're also afraid of being non-compliant. So this kills creativity. So these multinationals have to seek a better balance in terms of their leadership between making mistakes and turning out to be non-compliant, and actually being creative and offering a workplace where people want to come back to, as you were saying at the beginning of this conference. If not, they end up appointing controllers rather than leaders. And this, it's like hitting on the kneecap to everybody else. People have to work, so they go and work there, but they're not happy. They leave early, they arrive late, they ask for sick leave when they're not sick.
Yeah, I think what you're mentioning, Dr. Alfredo, is they have a standard SOPs, and they go as SOPs, standard operating procedures, and they just follow that, and there's no creativity, there's no innovation, and everything is killed. because they are 100% compliance and they follow SOPs. Where is CEO taking a risk? Where is CEO making a mistake and learning out of it? Where is he? I think smaller companies have much better leaders.
Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Those are risk takers.
There is
That's where creativity happens. You know, well, I didn't mention something when I was a young trainee in Brazil as an economist. I was selected to join an investment bank. I applied because I had never applied for a job. You know. And the guy that interviewed me was a vice president, a very interesting man, and he had studied at Cambridge, and I declined the offer. And he was surprised, you know. He said, "Well, listen, I mean, I know it might not look very interesting, but it is." I said, "Well, but I became an economist in order to help the world." I was that kind of person, and I can't see myself, you know, working in investment. I can't see the purpose. They will fit my purpose in life. And he confided to me, "Well, you know, Alfredo, I graduated in literature at Cambridge, and I never thought that I would see myself counting other people's money. But I've learned to have some fun with it. So if you ever think of working for an investment bank, come back to me and don't hesitate." But really, you know, the people are trained to be in such a way, the way they dress, the way they behave, they're pushed to have the car of the year or the watches. And, you know, it ends up distracting them from what is important in life. Yeah, so it's something that it's those tribes, so to speak, they can be deleterious to leadership, to true leadership.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. I think you have touched one of a very important and essential point that uh, creativity, innovation, risk-taking ability, making mistakes do not happen because they are into their in the box. They are not breaking the box, or they are not creating a new box to think. Let me go to another question now, Dr. Alfredo. Now we are into presently in this pandemic, COVID-19.
Yes.
And you know, we had never thought about it in February or January 2020. We never thought the life was going on, everything was
Scary, yes.
so now then we got into this entire disaster. And you've seen many leaders, including political and business leaders, started shivering. I don't want to name the leaders, political leaders were. Now, other side, when we talk about leadership in crisis, which is the important subject of leadership. Now, how do we throw light on this leadership in crisis? What could have been done better by these leaders who were making statements and shivering, especially I'm talking about period of February, March, April 2020.
My turn? Yes?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Listen, it's very hard to face a crisis. So let's be kind on them. But more could have been done, certainly. So too many people failed. I mean, if you read the magazine The Economist, they didn't see it coming. They have correspondents in China. And the first time that we saw something about, you know, COVID-19 was in mid-January or later. And it wasn't even on the front page. It was an internal article. And actually the article said, "We have never been as well prepared." So really, if you're a business leader and you take your cues from people like those, you're done. Right? Because you tend to downplay the importance of the infection of this disease. Now, something that we have still to figure out is why was it that it traveled towards the West? Started in China, but it didn't go as early to California. It traveled west. Actually, across the Silk Road, so to speak. First Iran, and then Italy, and then Spain, and then it jumped to New York. So we have to figure out something about that. But the question is that even when it was very close to us, like in Iran, in the Western world, we failed to be prepared. It was only when it hit Italy that people became, whoa, whoa, whoa. You know what's happening in Italy? So why were these guys so insensitive towards it? What made them fail in reading the weak signals that were already there? That is something that we have to prepare better for. Because there are some people that see it, but they're not paying attention to. So how is it that we can structure our organizations to be more receptive to the people that are more sensitive to perceiving weak signals? They're weak because they are an antecedent. While they are far away, you can't really tell how important they may be. And so organizations like Kodak, Xerox, Blockbuster, they all failed, though the signals were already there. When Netflix became what it is today, Blockbuster was too late, right? But at a time, Netflix tried to sell itself to Blockbuster. So, no, we're not going to have anything to do with it. So you can't really blame this business leader for not seeing it, because really too few of them saw it. Now, once it hits you and you were not prepared, there is no purpose in shifting blame on one another. The area is what can we learn from it? And one of the things that we have to learn is when there is no precedent, like the lawyers speak, really you only have your values to guide you. And many of these so-called leaders, whether political or business leaders, they failed to react to their values and show the empathy that was needed. People were frightened. They were suffering. But we found ourselves in hospitals with inadequate equipment. They didn't even have masks, overalls. They didn't have the equipment to deal with it. And they were risking their lives to help us, but to help all of us. I mean, those were true heroes, and the people recognized them as heroes. But, the leaders, the business leaders, even in the health sector, were absent. Nobody thinks of the leaders of the pharma company or medical devices as heroes because they were not there.
They're not there.
Somehow they felt that was not their problem. They were not there to solve it. But listen, if that's not their problem, then whose is it? Right? So that was something which was difficult to swallow, so to speak, and it's something that we have to learn from. Now, if we learn anything out of it, and the problem is empathy, there are lots of people that have lost their jobs. Yeah. And they're quite unlikely to get them back because, the world has changed severely so. So all those people that work in the hospitality business, for example, travel agencies, rent cars, they're going to have a hard time. And quite frankly, we speak about building better, but I haven't seen much of an effort, orchestrated effort to do it. So for example, all those small restaurants that have not been able to remain open, are they coming back? Probably not, unless you help them to get back on their feet. If you don't help them, they're going to be replaced by large food chains. And we're going to see all the same things, those coffee chains and those chicken chains and those hamburger chains. And, that's not the type of world that we wanted to see. I mean, that's good business, fast food business is good business. But there has to be space, room for the diversity that we need. So it's not only the diversity of the people that you hire, but the diversity of the opportunities to enjoy life, which counts a lot. And I would hate to live in a world, and my children to live in a world, where you can only choose between having a hamburger or a fried chicken or a coffee shop. Not good.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I would say that you are giving us learning about values, empathy, and diversity of
Hmm.
not only business, the products, the people, the interactions. And I love that. We need not to have only those
Thank you.
companies, with hamburgers and this. We need diversity of thought. We need diversity of action. We need
Yes.
diversity of products. And we need the small players on the roadside, small restaurants. And how will
Yes.
we get back unless we support them to be back? I have a question here which is coming to mind.
Hmm.
While we saw these business leaders, some of the political leaders, shivering what we talked in our previous question, I could see some of the women leaders
Hmm.
much better,
Hmm.
much compassionate.
Yes.
And their thinking and their handling of this crisis was much stronger. The way they took the accountabilities in hand, responsibilities in
Hmm.
hand, roles in hand, and you could see some of the 6 to 7 women prime ministers in the world different. And why I'm asking this question to you is, uh, I did share with you I'm running this Women Power, a global movement in 20 countries,
Yeah,
as
great initiative of yours. Yes.
1 million women to be together on this platform. Is there a difference in terms of a women leadership, women being a leader and a man being a leader? Is there anything to do with DNA? I would like to know from you.
Yes, it's a hard, difficult question, DK. You're right in pointing out that there are some female leaders, political leaders, that have made a great job in handling the response to the pandemic. You don't want to name names, but I'll name one which I love, Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. I mean, I can name her because it's such a small country that won't make a difference, right? So it's not politicizing our talk. But she's an outsider, right? I mean, she she has come into the forefront of the world leadership out of nowhere. A very small country, an island, very close to Antarctica. So, this is what I was telling. Meritocracy, that depends where you start. And this woman came out literally from nowhere. I mean, I don't want to offend New Zealanders, but it's pretty far out. I mean, I come from Uruguay. It's a country of sheep as well as a New Zealander, so there is no offense there. But the important thing is that those are leaders that emerge. They're voted into office, unlike the people in business organizations, which is top down. So there is something which is important. Now, what happens at organizations is that frequently, at least in this initial phase of the transition towards women leadership, is that some of these women were appointed by men for their masculine traits and not for their feminine ones. So, though we do have a lot of women who are business leaders, I am not sure that they would be of the type of Jacinda Ardern for not for their own failings, but from the way that they were selected. And this could doom the force of change, because if they don't live up to the expectations of people, they might not make it, and then people will give up and say, "Oh, listen, I mean, let's appoint a man because they know how to do things." So the wrong appointments may have a very deep impact in the future. I think that we do have, yes, female leaders that are far more competent than many male leaders that I know. The question is, will they actually be able to raise to the positions of authority that we need them to? How will they be selected? This is something that we have to work. It has to do with those board of governors that I will tell you. If they continue appointing people in the same way, we're not going to get anywhere. So, people like you who are asking women leaders, giving them a platform for them to speak is very, very important. Now, I wouldn't want to complete my answer, difficult answer, for a great problem without mentioning that it's not only about women, is it? I mean, we have failed a lot of people in many countries. And it's not only women. We have failed Black people. We have failed Native people in Latin America. You've got Dalits in India. You've got many people that have been left out. And you have to bring them in order for you to build a society that is peaceful. It may require the type of empathy that women can bring to the picture if they are properly selected for those traits that are so beautiful. But we have to keep in mind that it's not only a problem of promoting women, difficult as it is.
Very great. I think you really hit it. We need to, we have already crossed a lot of time and there are a lot of questions coming in, but I have one or two questions for you now. Dr. Alfredo, I now move to an important personality which both you and me, or even Asha, miss today. I'm talking about Padma Shri Dr. Preetham Singh.
Yeah,
As you know, he was my guru, my father, my mentor.
mine
You
too.
remember, we were together in May 2020 when we had Dr. Mithas from US, Dr. Sola from UK, yourself, Asha, myself, on that evening.
We were lucky.
We were lucky. And could you share one or two thoughts about this great man? I'll be very grateful. Quick one.
Well, nobody knows him as well as you and Asha and other Indians, but he is a world figure, you know, of great stature. A very inspiring person, very kind, very unassuming. So you could actually get close to him without fearing, though he was a towering figure. He was a great storyteller.
Absolutely.
Great storyteller. I'll just give you one anecdote because you told me you're running short of time, and it's actually noon here, so you have to go to the restroom. But I took a group of Brazilians to New Delhi and Gurgaon actually to meet, and I didn't know Pritam then, but I had already interacted with Asha. It's another beautiful, inspiring person. And Pritam came into this small room where we were gathered, and he started giving his views on management through stories. Not long after, all these Brazilians, including me, had tears in their eyes. He was able to move people so much. People that he didn't really know. I don't know how many Brazilians he had come up with before. The next day he asked me, Alfredo, why did they all cry? Because it was very moving. You know, this man in a very frail composture, he was not a big person. He was actually very thin and not very tall, with a thin voice, almost crackling voice, speaking very gently about very important subjects and telling them as if they were a story to be heard. So it immediately breaks down all barriers. And the people were so infused with this story that they actually cried. And it's pretty hard to get business people to cry, unfortunately. Unfortunately. So he was a great man, and we were very lucky to have him around, really. I'm very thankful for it. I owe him a lot, a lot.
Personally, me, I owe a lot to him. We remember him today. He is probably watching us that we are talking about that great man. My last question to you, Dr. Alfredo. I have to
Yes.
give you the questions now from the audience.
Okay.
What are your one or two messages to business leaders around the world whose businesses have gone to mess? They are struggling to reboot, rebuild, reestablish. Can you give two key messages to them as business leaders?
Well, there is the golden rule, you know, that has origins in Asia. I mean, don't do to other people what you wouldn't like them to do to you. that is a basic waiter. People usually forget about that, unfortunately. But what you can ask those leaders is to ask them, what would you like your obituary to look like?
Ah,
Huh? I mean, once you're dead, it can happen at any time, what would you like to be remembered for? What is it that your children will have to read in the papers if you're large enough to appear in the papers, right? If you ask people to actually live up to those standards, they're probably going to be a bit more careful than they have been in the past. So I would ask everybody in a position of leadership to seek virtue, because that is what happiness is made out from. It's not pleasure. But unfortunately, most business are managed in order to help people to attain pleasure by a larger bonus with which they can buy things. But the most important things in life you can't buy. Right? So we should actually be asking people, listen, think over. You're going to die, right? So what is it that you want to be remembered for? It's not about how much you earned, the houses or the yachts or the cars that you used, or how many people you were actually leading in a business. I mean, did you have a purpose that you sought to attain that was larger than yourself? I mean, that is something that I would like to tell any business leader.
you are really known as a doctor of leadership. And
I don't know,
how
so
is
I
it-
don't know.
what has been your purpose? And when you are not there in this world, what would you like your obituary to be? What
Yeah,
people write about you?
yeah.
Oh my God, what a statement. What a
Hmm.
statement. I got a question from you from the audience.
Yes,
And now let me quickly go to this audience. There's Milane from Spain. She is one of the women power. She is our
yes,
chapter head of women power in Spain. How
yes,
can we remove the labels from empathy, compassion, inclusiveness as being more feminine? They are simply human traits. How can
yes,
we tell them as assets for the male leaders?
yes,
Embrace them.
yes. I don't know if I understood the full question, but I have the idea, yes, that there is a problem there. We are attaching those labels to females when they really should be labels to identify human behavior. Uh, Unfortunately, amongst most males, by the way that we are brought up to fight, the warriors were usually men. Uh, those values are sort of downplayed in our upbringing. So we tend to ascribe them to feminine traits.
Hmm.
That's wrong. So if the world is to change in any better way, we should change the way that we bring up our men as well, to allow them to be more feminine as we consider women to be. And this will allow them to, behave in a way that will have traits like empathy and love of the other, that will not be only feminine traits. There is this beautiful saying that goes, half of mankind is made of women, and the other half are the sons of women.
I love
So,
that.
yes, because this is what it boils down to.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic, fantastic. There's another question. We are seeing very irresponsible behavior from some youth in many countries. Is this a sign of lack of empathy due to upbringing we are giving them? How can we turn this around? Now,
I didn't really understand. What is it that we're seeing,
we are
DK?
seeing some of the youths going differently in today's environment, and they are behaving differently. They are behaving irresponsibly.
Yeah.
And is it because we are not upbringing them properly? How can we turn this around? Very beautiful question. And
Yes, very.
This is happening in many parts of the
Uh,
world.
yeah, it's very hard to change people once they are old.
Oh, yes.
You know that adage, old people don't learn any new tricks.
Sure.
But you have to attempt to persuade them, and particularly if they are in power. But if they are in power, they don't tend to listen much. What we have to do is change the schooling. This we are on a long-term journey, right? This will take us a generation if we start today. I think that if you see people that are behaving irresponsibly, chasing after money, using their time to produce goods that really don't last long and nobody really needs,
Mm.
then why are they there? It's sickening. It's a pity, but they're into it. It's a rat race. And
Right.
the majority of those corporations are just producing things that people don't really need, but they're fighting each other for market share.
Ah, no, every day, every day.
Every day. Oh, listen, it's a shame. It's a shame, really. But we can forget about those guys. Let's work on their children.
Yeah. Let's work on their children. So
But
that,
business schools are not the best place to do that. Huh?
oh, I like it.
Mm.
Business schools are not the best place to do that.
No, 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 because they tend to reproduce the status quo, right? And
So how do we do, what should be a revolutionary idea of doing with youth?
well, write stories for children, like I'm doing now, right? Because those stories, they're not only for children, right? They're for their parents as well, right? They have to read them to the children. And in the process of reading, they're thinking, huh? Right? I mean, I wrote the story about this cow that learned to fly to reach greener pastures. Now, there's an important message there. All
Hmm.
right, I have needs that and I have to fight against the obstacles, even if they feel that they are absurd. I mean, how can I learn to fly if I am a cow? And who will coach me? Right? Birds. Will I pay attention to those small creatures who are telling me that I can? Right? So those stories are stories which are addressed to children, but also are aimed at changing the parents, giving them the strength to train their children on a different outlook to the world.
Fascinating. I think that's a great response.
Yeah, but
I have,
you have to pay better to the teachers at schools, right? Hold the children at school for longer hours. It's
teachers
a
are
it,
the builders of the nation and the world.
yeah,
I
it's not
always
easy.
say, I always say, in case I get a God and a teacher in front of me, I will bow before the teacher first and then God,
Yes,
because that
yes.
is the role of a teacher. So, Milani, we need to change in terms of graduating these students, schooling them with the right stories, and the more older they become, it will be tough for them to change. I have
Hmm.
got another question, Dr. Alfredo. Yeah, Milani says, I love it. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
answer. Milani says, thanks for your answer. I love it. And she says, great tip you gave. I seek virtue. And this is Vinod K. Pandita. He is asking, what is the most important leadership skill once one could develop in times of crisis and conflict? He is talking about what is the most important leadership skill in crisis and in conflict.
Listen, listening.
Wow.
It's, leadership is not about. It's not only about doing. Right? It's by allowing people to be heard, and
Wow.
then allowing them to feel that they own part of the solution. Right now, those leaders that say, like somebody that we know well, say, "You're fired, you're fired." I mean, those guys, they will be thrown to the dustbin.
Wow.
Hmm?
Wow.
They're already on their way out, thankfully. You
You know,
didn't want to mention names. I didn't.
yeah. No, but it's a very important thing. Leadership is, listening skills. And there are
Yes.
not many leaders who listen to their people.
No, no,
And
no.
you don't listen, you don't understand what is the fire going on. And the moment you listen, you start responding with empathy and you start aligning to the problems and issues and you
That's right.
solve
That's
it.
right. That's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, I have got another question now coming from Tina. Tina, I am going to unmute you here and you can ask the question yourself. You are on Zoom. Others I have to go ahead, Tina. You can unmute. Please ask your question. Yes, Tina, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Tina.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir, my name is Tina. I'm from JNK. I'm a senior research fellow of Jammu University, the business school. And it's a very coincidence that my research domain include expatriate management, and the title of my research study, PhD research study, is I have studied a leadership behavior of international managers and multinational corporations in India. And it's basically a comparative study of foreign nationals who are performing across various MNCs vis-a-vis Indian nationals who are working in India. So it was really a great day, and I was really very impressed. I got very impressed on hearing your insights on leadership
Thank you.
behavior, and it was really interesting, in fact. But my question to you is slightly different, since I am serving an academic institution. I'm a lecturer teaching college students, and basically students are a little bit confused as far as their career goals, their ambitions are concerned, and they're imposed certain decisions by their parents. And as we all know, that child has a right to achieve his dream, and imposing certain interests on them and pressurizing them to opt for certain goals which they might not be interested. And all these things end up with a grim situation, like we see many students committing suicides, blah blah. So briefly, I would come to my question, that how as an academician, how as a teacher,
Mm.
we can develop effective leadership behavior or skills for effective career planning, to build certain effective career planning strategies among students across educational institutions. I mean, this is a very increasing concern, I must say. Many students have recently, when NEET examination was going on, many students committed suicide. So there is, as far as academic leadership is concerned, we are lacking some things in this domain. How we can build an effective strategy to understand what actually student wants to become, and by not imposing, I hope you got my question.
Yes. Thank you, Tina. It's a difficult question, huh? Because once you are a university academic and they give you those students to train, they have to attain goals that I was speaking about. And they don't have much time, and it has to be done during a certain period. So, of course, there's a lot of pressure. You can't break those rules because you're working within an organization, right? But there are ways in which you can attempt to elicit what is it that they would rather do, and see if within the scope of your academic institution you can gear those students towards their goals. Give you an example just from my own life. I mean, I was in Uruguay, a small country, not very developed. I couldn't have studied many things if I wanted to be a leader and, wanted to have some idea, some impact in politics, which is what I was doing at the time, right? A student representative. And at the time that the country was going down the drain, eventually it had a coup d'etat. Everybody had to flee if they were able to flee. So I had to study economics because, there was nothing else that I could study. It was either engineering, law, medicine. And I became an economist because what happens is you become an economist and then you move country and the university asks you, well, you want to transfer here? Yes, yes. And say, well, you get put into a slot, economics, right? And when I went into Cambridge, I was accepted at the School of Economics to do my PhD. And I ended up being, you know, an economist that didn't want to be an economist. But this is what but you know, I studied leadership in shanty towns. I studied leadership in samba schools. So I was looking for how is it that the leaders emerge in those organizations. So there is always a chance for you to do something more than was expected from you with the narrow fields of goals that work in business schools. There are, you know, if you listen to your students, what is it that they would like to do? There is something that you can actually give them. You have that wisdom because you're a few steps ahead of them, and guide them towards something that will be more fulfilling for them. They will still be pleasing their parents who put them through all that thing and probably paying for the school too, or paying for their sustenance in life, but they will be doing something closer to what they would have liked.
True. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you,
All
sir.
the best, Tina,
Thank you,
for your
Tina. Thank you
research
for your
work.
question, Tina.
All the best for your research work. Anytime you want any tips, I will connect you to
Thank
Dr.
you.
Alfredo.
Yes, yes.
Surely, thank you, thank you. I require a huge help from your side. Many questions apart from this, but I'll surely drop a mail.
On
Please.
email.
Thank
You
Please
can
do
shoot
so.
Thank
an
you. Thank
email
Please do so.
and he can respond to your many questions, no problem. He is a doctor
Thank
of leadership.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
I got Mr. Vivek Harkoli. He is again a global business leader. He is wanting to have a question. Yeah, Vivek, go ahead. Dr. Alfredo for you.
Dr. Alfredo, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Vivek.
Good afternoon, DK. Good evening, DK.
Good evening.
I was listening, Doctor, to your interaction that you had with Dr. Pritam Singh
Yes.
time, and that you said that he moved people. Now, by moved, I understood that he was able to communicate
Yes.
with the people, and that was the reason why he was able to move people.
Yes.
Now, in business environment, we expect leaders to communicate down the line, right? That is one of the leadership qualities. My question is reverse. How can people down the line or managers make the CEO or the leaders communicate? How can the people down the line make, or what should they do to make the leaders communicate? It appears there is some communication gap. So how can the
Yes, a big
managers
one.
down the line make the leaders communicate?
Yes, Vivek, I'll attempt to answer that question. If the leader has been appointed from above, he has a greater problem in communicating, because seldom will they be the adequate leader for the people that they're expected to lead. When the leader emerges from the organization, it's most likely that they won't have that problem. So what to do when there is a problem? I would say attempt to persuade them to listen, to make the time that they think they don't have to listen. Listen not only to the people the immediate people that he or she has appointed to report to him, but jump that chain and go to the people that he actually needs to listen. Because those people that are in the front line, probably far removed from the top and rarefied leadership, those guys know a lot. And it's them that solve the day-to-day problems with customers, with supply chains, with whatever is necessary. And connecting to them is important, but not from a position of authority. Sometimes this leader may need to do that through third parties. For example, I'll tell you a very short story, and unfortunately, it's the time in Portugal when I need to close because other things are closing and I have to reach them. But let me just tell you a short story that is quite, I believe, enlightening for the question that you have asked me, Vivek, which is a very important question. There was a large company in Brazil that was producing paper. And you know how paper mills work. You know, you put the factory, and in order to make it productive, they have to plant trees around it, close to the factory, because the transportation cost is large. So usually those paper companies tend to instill a lot of trees around the company. And in a country like Brazil, that might mean that they get into conflict with the natives that were living on that land. The paper company claimed that they had bought the land from them. But the natives haven't actually sell, you know, you don't sell air, you don't sell the rivers, you don't sell the birds. The natives took the money, but they thought the land was theirs and they shouldn't be moved. But the workers at that company that were in the front line of logging those trees were not amused by the resistance of the natives. So they went to court. When things take long, eventually the Supreme Court of Justice in Brazil ruled that the natives have actually sold that land and they should move. Now, when the frontline people, you know, in the lumberjacks, got the gist that the Supreme Court of Justice was behind them, they got the bulldozers and they razed the villages of the natives. They sent them packing, going away with children, with whatever they had, they could carry out. It was horrible, horrible. And they thought they had won. But eventually the word got out. And the people that protect native aboriginals or whatever in the world started crying out for what this company had done. So investors in that company, their shares were negotiated in New York Stock Exchange, they dropped. The Norwegian crown that had invested in that company disinvested. And, you know, suddenly the CEO of this company would say, well, listen, I didn't know. And he probably didn't know what was going on the front line, but he should have. Now, he didn't have the time. He was traveling in helicopter all around Sao Paulo, down to the... So he thought he didn't have the time. And he asked me, what should I have done? I said, well, you should be closer to where the problem is. But how? I can't go there. And I said, well, perhaps you should have gone there sometimes. But if you didn't have the time, you could have appointed a few anthropologists to support them to develop their master's thesis on the work related to your industry and the natives. And you should have found time to have dinner or lunch with these people at least once every 3 months. And then you would have heard from trained people what was going on. And it wouldn't have cost you much. So you have to build those communication lines. Because if you don't, you're going to pay a very high price, both in happiness and in investment. So it's not a question of there is a gap. That gap must be bridged. And it can be bridged. You just have to be creative about it. Now, DK, I loved being here with you, but I have to move on because, you know, I have to cook. And I have to purchase the stuff before they close. So I must leave.
No, before, I am not taking any further question. Thank you, Vivek. I am requesting in Narula from Bangkok, Global Talent Companies Director, and he has been again a leadership coach, to propose vote of thanks. In.
Yes, I am here. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I can.
Good evening, Dr. Bakshi and Doctor of Leadership, Professor Alfredo Behrens.
Thank you.
It's great to meet you. Before I even go on, you know, I would like to throw an open invitation for both of you to come to Bangkok, Thailand.
Thank you.
Your valuable knowledge would be helpful to this country in Bangkok, Thailand, especially on leadership.
I
I'm
would
going to
love
be very brief, sir, and I'll move very quickly. Well, it's very important that your life, basically in the beginning is that you had your purpose and you had your goals from your family. It was from your uncle that you wanted to go to become a PhD, and it happens to be in Cambridge and in economics. Your father gave you a great opportunity to go to an English school, an international school.
No.
And
My
that is
father
where
was
you
was
got your
a maths
exposure.
scientist. Yes, he was lovely.
Yes, and that is where you got your exposure to the international environment. You became a person of this planet Earth because you are very versatile, you're very adaptive to all the environment and the people around you. And
Thank
that's
you very
very
much.
important for you
I
to
try
grow
to
up.
be. I try to be.
You are. And another good thing about you is you live in the cities around the Atlantic Ocean. Brilliant, and I think that gave you a lot of exposure from both sides of the oceans. At the university, you were trusted, you were given responsibility. It became a great motivator for you being an advisor. Suddenly you grew up because that motivated you, that trust, and people were asking you for your advice. And I think that was brilliant. And that's how you grow up into become a great leader and a great professor. You're still giving a lot of advice to many of the companies and corporations around the world. Brilliant, sir.
Thank you.
And you are
Thank
quite
you.
spiritual and very humble, because every time Dr. Bakshi tried to please you, you said, well, it's my luck. What is meant to be will be.
It's luck.
Behind it is a lot of hard work also, sir.
Yeah, there is. You have to be ready for it. Luck might not come your way, or it might come too late.
Agreed. It's a combination of both.
Yes.
And you believe in empathy, kindness, and to be compassionate as a leader, because it becomes very important. And you cited example that in America, where it's highly competitive and it can be very destructive, even though you win, but winners take it all and losers are left with nothing. That's very destructive and is very demotivating. Whereas in Cambridge, people are there not for the money, but for the knowledge. And that's beautiful. And we urge all the leaders to be there, not for the money, but for the people, for the co-workers within the company, and wonders will happen. And in South America, people always believe in enjoy the journey. The destination to be there is important, but enjoy as you go along.
Yes.
You understand the culture. If you want to understand the culture, you need to read literatures, read their anecdotes, because you will have a great reflection on why they behave the way they do. It's all reflected there.
Yes. To connect with
you
them,
also advise your audience, have confidence, believe in yourself, know your worth. But you're not talking about being egoistic, but it's important that you know your worth.
Yes, crucial.
There is a saying in a Chinese philosophy: once you reach the top, you are actually at the bottom, because you become even more humble.
It should be like that. It should be like that.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're not at the top.
Exactly. And attributes of leadership. You compared, the Catholic Church, because you said that the three last consecutive popes are not Italians. And the reason why is that because they are closer to the people. They could connect with the people that they are leading. And you urge all the corporate leaders to be able to get in touch with their co-workers. And that's very important. As Dr. Preetham Singh always says, know your people, know their family, know their children, know what are the issues they are facing, and it's very important. I'm keeping it very brief, so I like to say a lot, but let's be brief about it.
No, it's very interesting. It's a very beautiful summary. Thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome. And closer to the mindset of the people, that's important. And you talk about listening to the people. You also mentioned that creativity and mistakes are closely related. In fact, they are positively related. The more
Yes.
mistake you make, it means you're going to be more creative. Basically,
Yes.
that's what it is. Diversity is our strength, and we need to in the diversity, in the diverse world, we need to, before you make assumption, learn the facts. We need
Yes.
to, before you make a judgment, understand why. You need to do not hurt someone until you feel what are they
Yes.
feeling.
Yes.
And before you speak, think. In conclusion, how do you like your obituary to be written? You need to find out. You need to set a brand for yourself. How would you like to be branded? Your purpose should be larger than yourself. And the greatest leader of all time, if you want to move from good to the great leader, you need to be able to read even the smallest and the slightest of the signal and respond very quickly. Is so important. How do you do that? Become an active listener. Be a great communicator. So being an active listener is very important. And how do you become an active listener? You need to adapt what we call walk around leader. Communicate.
Yes. As Pritam used to
Connect
say,
with your
yes.
co-workers, just like Dr. Pritam Singh could connect with your team from Brazil. And that's what great leadership is all about. Thank you, Dr. Bakshi. And
No,
thank
thank
you
you,
also,
Ian.
Dr.
Thank you very
Alfredo.
much. Thank you very much.
God bless
And
all
thank
of
you.
you here.
Listen, I mean, it's important to thank you, DK, as well, for giving me this opportunity to speak to your crowd. And to Asha Bandarkar, who recommended me for this talk. I think she's very special, right? And a good successor of Dr. Pritam.
Yes, sure. We look towards her. In fact, in Narula from Thailand has done programs with Dr. Asha and Dr. Pritam Singh.
Oh, good. Good. Excellent.
Knows the family very well.
Thank you.
With that, I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Alfredo, for your time, and thank all the audiences around the world. You have been amazingly 95 minutes.
Oh, good.
Dr. Alfredo, Dr. Alfredo, sir, please go and buy your vegetable, enjoy the meal, cook, cheers.
Yes, I have to.
All the have a nice evening, Dr. Alfredo.
Be safe, be safe, stay safe, and let's hope for a better world. Thank you
Big
very,
round
very
of
much.
applause to you, Dr. Alfredo. Big round of applause. Okay, Doctor.
Bye-bye, bye-bye, sir.
Bye-bye, Achan, Tina.
Bye-bye, sir. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.